India Legal, stories that count.
Hello and welcome to another special readout from India Legal magazine. As you know, we are the nation's first political legal independent weekly focusing on controversial issues of national and international importance. The video readouts we present to you regularly are the editorial team's choice of the most significant stories we believe should receive close scrutiny and wide circulation. You can watch them along with the visuals or listen to them as you would a podcast. Now, the topic for this commentary has been hogging the headlines in India. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The alarmists saying that this could lead to heightened tensions, even a war in this region. China claims Taiwan as its own territory, occupied by a regime backed by Western powers. And any initiative taken by any other nation to cement strategic ties with Taiwan makes the dragon see red. Now, Pelosi's visit has the dragon breathing fire. China has been conducting live military and naval exercises within striking distance of Taiwan. Now, Pelosi is no ordinary legislator. She is, at age 82, considered America's Iron Lady who controls the business of the House of Representatives. She is the one person who could intimidate even Donald Trump when he was president. In fact, she led the fight for his impeachment proceedings while he was president. So what does all this add up to? What's the story behind the story in the new US-China-Taiwan flare-up? What lies ahead? Well, we asked our US correspondent Kenneth Tiven to send us his analysis. Tiven is a seasoned journalist. He was former editor of the Washington Post, the iconic Washington Post, and one of the founding vice presidents of CNN News, CNN International News. What follows is a readout from Tiven's latest report for India Legal magazine. We call it the Pelosi effect. Now, Tiven observes that China's bellicose reaction to a brief visit to Taiwan by the US politicians headed by US Speaker Nancy Pelosi was entirely predictable, but the consequences could impact the entire Asia-Pacific region. Now, in today's climate of the Russia-Ukraine war, there is a nervousness when superpowers behave negatively. The stated objective for House Speaker Pelosi and a delegation of US representatives visiting Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea and Japan was to discuss trade, the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change and security and quote-unquote democratic governance. Congress is in recess and these trips are sometimes considered a political perquisite or, as they call, a kind of a fun junket, not this one. The bugbear for Beijing was that her neighbor's delegation's one-day visit to Taiwan. The delegation's stop in Taiwan pushed China to react with a show of military force which may benefit the American position that soft Chinese diplomacy is really never soft. Now, China's military often holds live fire exercises in the 160-kilometer wide Taiwan Strait, as well as in the South China Sea. However, this week's warships encircle Taiwan's main island and target areas within its territorial sea. President Xi Jinping reacts to bolster the international claim to Taiwan and for international support. In fact, China's export-based economy has taken a hit from the pandemic's impact on global life and business. Multiple internal issues in China can be obscured by an outburst of anti-American sentiment dominating the all government-controlled media. Now, as China's most powerful leader in generations, Xi believes unifying Taiwan with the mainland is a primary goal of his rule and a key to what he calls China's national rejuvenation as a modern, united superpower. India has had its share of both verbal and military confrontations with China, most focused on territorial issues along their border. This negative propaganda response is nothing new. What is happening is actually best understood with some historical perspectives. In the 5 years after the end of World War II, India gained independence while China emerged from decades of Japanese domination with a communist government in charge. Taiwan has never politically been a part of the People's Republic of China. When Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the KMT, fled China after the Civil War, was actually driven out of China after Mao Zedong's Communist Revolution of 1949, he sought shelter in Formosa, now known as Taiwan, as the island was named at the time. With backing from the US, he imposed martial law on the locals and the Chinese citizens who would come with him. China and the United States twice came close to going to war over Taiwan in the 1950s. Now, when the Cold War tensions subsided in the 1980s, Taiwan democratized its government, China at the time opened its economy, and the two are actually trading partners, even now. As America's post-war opposition to communism faded, it was possible in the 1990s for agreement on the One China concept for global diplomacy issues. Now, this did allow Washington to continue supporting Taiwan as a democratic enclave on an island 161 kilometers from the mainland. That's about the distance from Mumbai to Pune. President Joe Biden and his State Department advisors are sophisticated experts, not ideologues. Representative Pelosi didn't decide on a frivolous summer recess trip with several colleagues out of the blue. Pelosi has plenty of experience with Taiwan. She has a tight relationship with President Biden from decades of shared political experience in Washington. She also represents the San Francisco, California district with a significant Chinese American population. A reasonable assumption is that this stopover by a congressional trip to Asian nations offered a non-verbal message to the Chinese leadership regarding American positions on the international aspects of the South China Sea, as well as its special relationship with Taiwan. Geographically, the US is a Pacific nation, with 4 states having Pacific Ocean coastlines. Representative Pelosi met with Taiwan lawmakers and with Taiwan's president, Tsai Ing-wen, offering assurances of United States support despite threats from China. Quote, "Today the world faces a choice between democracy and autocracy," said Pelosi, adding, "America's determination to preserve democracy here in China and around the world remains ironclad." That's quoting Nancy Pelosi. It was in keeping with her long history of poking China in the eye. She also brought economic assurances, calling a trade deal between Taiwan and the United States hopefully imminent, and holding a cordial meeting with the chairman of the Taiwan chip giant, TSMC. For Taiwan, it was a symbolic victory regardless of the duration or the substance. You see, Pelosi's trip made her the highest ranking active member of the United States government to visit the island in 25 years. And it offered a rare moment of international support for the self-ruled democratic island, which China has relentlessly tried to isolate. Well, a holiday atmosphere followed Pelosi as she toured Taipei, the capital. Hundreds turned out to watch her plane land, and Taipei's tallest building was illuminated with welcome messages, while both protesters and supporters waited at her hotel. Regional analysts say Xi's growing interest in unification reflects domestic political realities as well. Seeking an unprecedented third term as leader at a Communist Party Congress in the fall, that's coming up in the next few months, makes him keen to project an image of strength at home and abroad, particularly on the question of Taiwan. Now, while Silicon Valley in California employs thousands of Indians in technical and managerial positions, Taiwan's role in the digital universe is different. That island of 23 million people, population about the size of Sri Lanka, well, it manufactures 90% of certain types of critical computer chips. The United States would prefer a democratic Taiwan for this reason alone. Similarly, the Beijing government wants control over this segment, recognizing the potential power it represents globally. In Beijing, Hua Chunying, a spokeswoman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, said that more punishments for the United States and Taiwan would follow. As for the specific countermeasures, what can I tell you? All I can tell you, she said, is that they'll include everything that should be included. It will be firm, vigorous, and effective. That's what she said, the Chinese spokesperson. China's military is more powerful and more emboldened under Xi Jinping. Recently, Chinese officials who strongly asserted that no part of the Taiwan Strait could be considered international waters. The USA disagrees completely. Taiwan's military sought to signal that it did not wish to escalate the situation. Calling the military drills a blockade, it said the exercises had intruded into Taiwan's territorial waters, endangering international waterways and regional security. We resolutely defend national sovereignty and will counter any aggression against our national sovereignty, said Major General Sun Lifang, a spokeswoman for Taiwan's defense ministry. Hours after Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrived in Taiwan, Beijing added economic measures to its series of retaliatory moves, suspending exports of natural sand to the island, and stopping imports from Taiwan of certain types of fruit and fish. The bans are a vivid reminder for people in Taiwan that doing business with China, the island's largest trading partner, yes, ironically enough, China is Taiwan's largest trading partner, that this could be a risky business during times of high geopolitical tension. Over the years, Beijing had occasionally put pressure on the island's economy by restricting access to China's vast consumer market. Previous bans have targeted Taiwanese pineapples, wax apples, and grouper fish, among other products. Over the years, Taiwan has tried to diversify its commercial relationship with China. While Taiwanese investments in China gradually declined, the island's trade with China continued to grow. Its economic dependence on China continued through the early part of the pandemic, in part because the Chinese economy was doing well. Some bans have caused it lingering economic pain. The one on Taiwanese grouper fish in particular dealt a huge blow to a lucrative industry that has been sending 91% of its exports to China. The precise impact of China's ban on Taiwan's natural sand imports was not immediately clear. The local news media has reported that Taiwan imports both natural sand and manufactured sand from China. The two types of banned fish, horse mackerel and white striped hairtail, are not among its top 10 exported fish species. Chow Chun, an economic analyst and a former trade negotiator for the Taiwanese government, said that the fruit and fish bans would probably not have a major impact on the economy. The political message is greater than the economic hit, he says. Chinese social media has come under stricter censorship and government guidance, meaning that users' comments do not always reflect public opinion. Even so, the goal of absorbing Taiwan into China is widely shared by many Chinese people, and the online mood reflected support for Beijing's combative position. However, one Weibo commenter said, all the war propaganda, all the clamor, lies and hatred comes from those who never go to the battlefield, unquote. Another wrote, reject any political posturing, firmly oppose war. Some social media commentary considered the geopolitical strife a relief after China's run of bad economic news. To quote one of them, in a flash, everybody has stopped caring about bank accounts, mortgage strikes, abandoned building sites, and the leaks of private data. Pelosi has cured everyone's internal mental exhaustion, one person wrote on the social media. But the official Chinese denunciations ranged well beyond the House Speaker's visit. Quote, the United States government must shoulder responsibility, a Chinese Deputy Foreign Minister Xi Feng told the American ambassador in Beijing. That's Nicholas Burns. And this was reported by the Xinhua news agencies, which is China's prime wire service. For some time, the United States has said one thing and done another, constantly twisting, distorting, voiding, and hollowing out the one China principle. This is what the news agency stated, the Chinese news agency. In the USA, the Washington Post, now we come closer to home, closer to Washington, there's a little note of caution there. The Washington Post, it's a liberal newspaper and by no means considers China an ideal democratic nation. But the editorial board of the Washington Post found fault with many aspects of the trip. Of course, we share Ms. Pelosi's strong support for democratic Taiwan, said the Washington Post. Her condemnation of the Chinese communist dictatorship and her belief, as she put it in an op-ed for the Post, that it is essential that America and our allies make clear that we never give in to autocrats. What we do not comprehend, wrote the Post, is her insistence on demonstrating her support in this way at this time, despite warnings from a president of her own party, a former president of our own party, that the geopolitical situation is already unsettled enough. However much the 82-year-old Ms. Pelosi might want a capstone event for her time as Speaker before a likely Republican Party victory in November in the congressional elections, in case that her leadership is ended, by going to Taiwan now, as President Xi Jinping of China is orchestrating his third time, was unwise. Now, these are words used by the Washington Post, and maybe a cautionary note is necessary in these days of conflict, of tension. Anything that increases tension and encourages international conflict that endangers the lives and economic livelihoods is certainly unwise. And the Washington Post editorial is rightly commented on this. This is your host editor Inderjit Badhwar. Until next time, goodbye for now.
India Legal, stories that count.